A tiny number for the hegemony, but a significant increase compared to the first wave, especially among the heavy units. The bleeding was slow, but steady. Lord Scientist Zarkin, what is the estimated time for neutralizing the interference, if this rate of attrition and resistance persists? HFY inquired. Zarkin adjusted his calculations, his eyes gleaming with the speed of processing. If current variables hold, and the biological entities can maintain this rate of sacrifice, the complete deactivation of the interference could extend far longer than expected for the second wave, perhaps triple the time or more. A significant delay in the extraction schedule, Emperor. An eternity for an operation that should have been a formality. Unacceptable, HFY decreed. The hegemony cannot allow this delay. General THRAC, order the deployment of thermal purge units to the points of highest resistance. Cities still maintaining interference will be purged efficiently. Lord Scientist Zarkin, prepare the stabilizer cascade protocol for the remaining terrestrial nodes. We will force their collapse if physical entry is too slow. Admiral Vale interjected. Emperor, deploying the thermal purge consumes massive energy, it could pose a problem for extraction. We have no time for subtleties, HFY replied. The High Councils demand progress. Let damage be the cost of efficiency. This interference must be silenced. Let the bleeding end. The planet will be ours, with or without its structures. The order echoed across the bridge, the cold logic of the hegemony overriding all minor considerations. Earth was about to experience a new level of annihilation. Chapter 29, The Grip of Annihilation. Location, multiple global battle zones. Time, moments after the KRTAC decision to intensify the purge. The battle escalated to avoid further delays, and a new level of alien fury was unleashed upon Earth. KRTAC ships in orbit altered their deployment patterns, and a new class of descent units, faster and with an ominous thermal signature, plummeted toward the planet. President Li Na's warnings had come true, the battle for global survival had grown even more desperate. Beijing, China, the shattered fortress. In Beijing, the air vibrated with the roar of the thermal purge. Gigantic KRTAC units, equipped with energy projectors that turned concrete into vapor and metal into molten pools, advanced mercilessly. The stench of scorched ozone and melted structures was overwhelming. Li Na, inside her bunker, watched as the defensive lines, so painstakingly built, disintegrated under the assault. The southern perimeter of the main node is collapsing. They're vaporizing our armored units, an officer shouted. Li Na clenched her fists, frustration burning within her at the slow pace of the long-range strike project. Her engineers worked feverishly in the research section, oblivious to the hell unfolding above. Every life lost, every building crumbling, was time bought for that faint possibility. Redirect the automated defense systems to the lower tunnels. Do not let them reach the reactors, ordered Li Na, knowing that every minute Beijing's node remained operational was a Pyrrhic victory. Pyongyang, North Korea, unleashed contained fury. On the Korean peninsula, the KRTAC had encountered unexpectedly fierce resistance. The supreme leader of North Korea, his identity as shrouded in secrecy as the KRTAC themselves, had ordered total defense. Unlike other nations, North Korea had maintained for decades a vast underground arsenal and an extremely militarized population. The immense tunnel networks beneath Pyongyang became a deadly labyrinth for the invaders. Millions of soldiers, armed with energy rifles and improvised explosives, launched kamikaze assaults against KRTAC units. There was no retreat, only advance or death. Hidden artillery complexes, camouflaged for generations, erupted from the ground to unleash massive salvos against the descent pods, sacrificing their positions for a single devastating strike. Every inch will be defended to the last drop of blood, thundered a message across North Korea's communication networks. The KRTAC thermal purge met fanatical determination, turning the capital into a boiling cauldron of combat. The alien advance, though relentless, came at a price that, even for them, was beginning to be noticeable. New Delhi, India, a desperate fight. In India, the second KR-TAC wave targeted already devastated population centers, seeking to crush any remaining resistance. General Sharma, from an improvised command center beneath the ruins of New Delhi, coordinated his forces. Recon drones reported the arrival of the new, deadly, thermal purge units, mowing down what was left of the city. The battered Indian forces responded with layered defenses. They turned the sprawling slums and collapsed infrastructure into traps, forcing the KR-TAC to advance through narrow alleys where they could be ambushed with explosives and concentrated fire. The civilian population, once panicked, now joined the resistance, guiding soldiers through hidden routes or pointing out enemy positions. Hold the line at the India Gate sector. We will not allow them to destroy our nation, a brigade commander shouted over the radio. The KR-TAC responded with searing energy blasts that incinerated entire sections of the city, but every human casualty delayed the invader. Every act of resistance was proof of the tenacity they had underestimated. Other fronts, global suffering. From the frozen steppes of Siberia to the jungles of South America, the battle raged on. The KR-TAC, beyond their projected efficiency, faced global resistance, an entire species refusing to vanish without a fight. Earth had become a slaughter field on an unprecedented scale. Every extinguished life was a small victory against the enemy, one more minute bought for the desperate hope of an impossible counterattack. Chapter 30, The Unexpected Attrition. Location, multiple global battle zones. Time, hours after the intensification of the second wave. Dust and smoke settled over a ravaged planet. The second wave had ceased, not because the invaders had been repelled, but because the intensity of their assault had diminished. Cities were now mere charred skeletons, landscapes of ruin and death. Yet, against all logic, humanity was still breathing. Beijing, China, an unbreakable spirit. In the Beijing bunker, Li Na watched the projections with a mix of horror and grim triumph. The Beijing counter-frequency node was still operational, though at a meager 25% of its capacity. The KR-TAC thermal purge units had withdrawn to defensive positions, leaving behind unimaginable destruction. Damage report, main sector, ordered Li Na, her voice rasped by tension. The city has been incinerated, an officer replied, his voice breaking. Casualties are catastrophic. Almost all surface infrastructure has been neutralized. But our underground levels held. The enemy units failed to breach the node's core. They were forced to withdraw under pressure from our defenses. Li Na nodded, turning her gaze toward the engineers section. Dr. Chen approached, his face gaunt but with a spark of hope in his eyes. President, the energy pressure on the long-range strike project has been extreme, but we endured it. We've made a critical breakthrough in tuning the extraterrestrial resonance frequency. We just need a little more time. A reprieve, however brief. Moscow, Russia, a frozen hell. In Moscow, Marshal Kuznetsov spat blood and dust. Winter was approaching, and the city's ruins were now a frozen labyrinth. The KR-TAC had achieved significant advances, but not total victory. The Moscow node operated at a precarious 30%. Our units held. Enemy retreat in the Kremlin sector, a soldier's voice roared over comms. The KR-TAC metal giants regrouped, leaving a trail of destruction but failing to deliver the decisive breach they sought. Kuznetsov stared at the tactical map. Thousands of his men had fallen, but the city remained a battlefield. They underestimated our tenacity. They do not understand the snow, or the spirit of this land. Every life lost has been a shield for the node. But we cannot withstand another assault like this. Washington, D.C., United States, the ghost city resists. President Maxwell gazed at images of what had once been his nation's capital. Now it was a ghost city, filled with rubble and the stench of death. Yet somewhere beneath its ruins, secondary counter-frequency nodes still emitted a faint signal, a defiance to the invader. Guerrilla tactics had inflicted irritating damage on KR-TAC units, forcing them to scatter and expend resources clearing out seemingly insignificant resistance pockets. The second wave had pushed humanity to its limit, but had not annihilated it. Enemy casualty report, Maxwell demanded, his voice heavy. The data was fragmented, but estimates revealed a significant number of extraterrestrial units neutralized, more than in the first wave, especially in ambush zones. They had advanced, yes, but they had bled for it. Andes Mountains, South America, the hidden resistance. In the Andes, joint South American forces had entrenched themselves deep within the mountains. The KR-TAC, infiltrator scouts, had managed to penetrate some levels, but were met with networks of explosive tunnels and automated defenses designed to disorient and destroy them in confined spaces. The Andean node continued to function at a robust 80% of its capacity, a thorn in the side of the hegemony. President Solis watched as enemy markers retreated from sectors of the mountain. The battle had been brutal, with hand-to-hand combat in the dark mines, but geography and human cunning had granted them an unexpected advantage. "We've endured," Solis whispered, his voice full of both relief and fear. "But their tactics are evolving. They did not anticipate such losses from the terrain. They want a clean, efficient victory. We must find a way to remain a problem." End of the second battle. The second wave had concluded. The KR-TAC had inflicted immense devastation, but had not achieved the total collapse of Earth's interference. Humanity, at an incalculable cost, had managed to cling to existence. Earth was exhausted, bleeding, but still standing. They had slowed the KR-TAC advance, forcing them to expend more resources and prolong a timetable that, for the invaders, was intolerably extended. The resistance had been far more tenacious than any KR-TAC calculation had predicted. The Great Harvest was not going to be as clean as they had expected. Chapter 31, The Unexpected Cost of the Harvest. Location, Command Bridge of the Supreme Battleship, Star Devourer, KR-TAC Vanguard Fleet. Time, hours after the cessation of the second wave. The cold light of the holoscreens illuminated the faces, or what passed for faces among the KR-TAC, of Emperor HFY, Lord Scientist Zarkin, and General HFY. The air on the bridge of the Star Devourer was more tense than ever. The second wave had concluded, but not with the total efficiency HFY had guaranteed to the High Councils. General HFY, the Emperor's voice was a blade of ice. "The data from the second phase is troubling. Your thermal purge units failed to collapse the interference at the high-priority nodes. What is your report on the planetary resistance?" HFY activated a projection showing Beijing, Moscow, and Washington, D.C. as mere clusters of rubble, yet with small pockets of biological and energetic resistance still active. Emperor. The biological entity has demonstrated an unprecedented capacity for damage absorption and suicidal tenacity. Their tactics of environmental sacrifice were unexpected. They have collapsed their own megastructures to create impenetrable barriers, slowing the advance of our heavy units. The infiltrator scouts did succeed in breaching the subterranean layers, HFY continued, but they encountered a network of defensive tunnels and explosive traps that caused significant attrition. The geology of the southern region, in particular, is proving a major obstacle, amplifying their energy defenses and channeling our units into kill zones. Our assault unit casualties have been high in this phase, HFY admitted, displaying a figure which, though minimal compared to the scale of their fleet, was considerably greater than projected. 8,672 KR-TAC units neutralized in the second wave, including 3,500 heavy vanguard units and 700 infiltrator scouts. An unacceptable cost for a Class Gamma purge operation. Lord Scientist Zarkin intervened, his eyes glowing with concern. Emperor, the analysis of the interference status after this phase is critical. Total deactivation has been delayed. The eastern nodes are operating at 25% and 30% capacity respectively. The southern-western node remains at a surprising 80%. Global interference has dropped from its original capacity, but not to the 20% threshold required for safe dark energy extraction. The inefficient resistance of this species is draining our resources beyond projection, Zarkin continued. Reconfiguration and redeployment of units are consuming more energy than anticipated, and the replacement demand for assault units is affecting the hegemony's timetable in Sector Beta. If this rate of attrition continues in further battles, the purge of Entity 347 Gamma could take much longer. It is an unsustainable delay. XYLR remained silent, processing the information. This was a massive stain on his record of efficiency. The pressure from the High Command was palpable, not only because of inefficiency, but also due to the inexplicable tenacity of a civilization that should have already collapsed. Inform the High Command that the resistance of Entity 347 Gamma is anomalous, XYLR ordered, his voice hard. It is not comparable to other class Gamma purges. The terrestrial biological systems are exhibiting adaptability and resistance to mass collapse that does not correlate with their technological level. I suggest that, to avoid further resource drain and unacceptable delays, the localized overload protocol for the remaining nodes be approved. Admiral Vale spoke up, concern in his tone. Emperor, the localized overload protocol would involve activating orbital dark energy pulse weaponry directly on the remaining nodal points. This would create severe instability in the planetary crust in those areas and could seriously damage the KRTAC subterranean infrastructure already established. Furthermore, residual energy dispersion would complicate the initial extraction of dark energy in those regions. And it would accelerate atmospheric collapse, added Zarkin, which, in the long term, would hinder full extraction of core dark energy, our primary objective. The Class Alpha Annihilation Protocol, which would pulverize the surface, is even less viable if the goal is long-term harvesting. XYLR processed their arguments. They could not damage the resource they had come to claim. Yet inefficiency was unacceptable. Then, an intermediate solution. General THRAC, prepare the third wave. This time, it will not be a surface purge. It will be an infiltration and full saturation operation against the remaining nodes. Deploy 80% of our deep drilling and tunnel assault units. We will focus all power on penetrating the subterranean nodes of the southern west and the entire east. Let the thermal purge unit secure the surface deployment zones, creating a shield, while the mass assault forces concentrate below. Lord Scientist Zarkin, activate the low-frequency seismic resonators in the node areas to disorient terrestrial subterranean defenses. We will accept greater collateral damage on the surface, but the integrity of the energy core must remain intact for extraction. That interference will be crushed from within. Admiral Vale nodded with cold efficiency. Understood, Emperor. A full subterranean assault strategy. This will accelerate the purge significantly, though the cost in units will be the highest yet. We have no time for inefficiency. The planet will be ours, and its interference will be silenced, even if it costs us more units, XYLR declared, frustration burning in his voice. Let the third wave begin at once. There will be no further pauses. The immense motherships in orbit began to vibrate, shifting into new positions with lethal determination. Earth was about to face its ultimate trial. Chapter 32, A Costly Breather, A New Threat. Location: South American Earth Command, Underground Complex No. 7. Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time, hours after the end of the second KRTAC wave. The air in the Buenos Aires bunker was thick with fatigue and fleeting relief. The second wave had ceased, leaving behind an even greater trail of devastation. Yet the key counter-frequency nodes remained, against all odds, operational. President Solis looked at the battle-marked faces of his colleagues. We've held on, Solis said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the cost has been unthinkable. Hundreds of millions more lives lost. Our cities reduced to ashes. But their advance was slower than they expected. That much is clear. They were forced to resort to more destructive tactics. Marshal Kuznetsov nodded. Their pattern is clear. First wave, sweep and initial landing. Then, a 6-day adjustment period before launching the second. And this time, the second wave dragged on longer than they likely intended. They failed to completely wipe out the main nodes in Beijing, Moscow, or the Andes. It's a Pyrrhic victory, but it's still a victory. President Maxwell rubbed his eyes. Those attacks, they were brutal. They cost us too much. But we delayed them. The question is, how much time have we really bought? And what comes next? Will they return with another wave, or change their strategy now that their initial plans have faltered? That is the crucial question, Li Na interjected, her image on the screen, reflecting her exhaustion. Their goal remains the nullification of our network. I estimate that, given the frustration they must feel at our persistence, and the extra time we've forced them to spend, their next attack could come even faster. Perhaps in 3 or 4 days. They won't give us much respite. A chill ran through the room. Time was humanity's scarcest resource. And with that little time, Li Na, President Solis asked, his gaze fixed. Has the Chinese nation been advancing on that project? Launching nuclear weapons at a certain range. What progress has there been? Can we count on it, even as a distant hope? Li Na nodded, a flicker of determination lighting her eyes. President, leaders. Project Goliath has made significant progress. After the first wave, our engineers focused on understanding the enemy's fundamental weakness, their reliance on an energy source that, though advanced, can be disrupted if struck at the exact time and place. To put it simply, Li Na continued. It's as if the enemy uses an invisible power cable for everything. Their shields, their weapons, their ships. We've discovered a very specific frequency, or note, that, if struck with enough force, at the right moment, would destabilize that cable for an instant. Normal nuclear weapons are too noisy and dissipate in our own network. But if the enemy moves away from the planet, beyond the reach of our counter-frequency grid, and if at that moment their cable is in a transition phase, like when their ships are preparing for long travel or reorganizing, we could strike them. And here is the breakthrough, she emphasized. Our scientists, led by Dr. Chen and Engineer Gao, have made critical progress in identifying the exact note and in creating a nuclear detonation that can sink it with the required precision. We've also refined our Goliath missile technology. It's a special type of missile that, once in empty space, can harness a small portion of that same energy they manipulate to give itself an incredibly powerful and rapid final boost. This would, in theory, allow it to reach their motherships at very long distances during that window of vulnerability. It's not ready yet, Li Na admitted. They need extremely rare components and a final calibration of extraordinary precision. It's a surgical operation on a cosmic scale. But we've made gigantic steps. We desperately need more time. And more resources from all of you to turn these prototypes into reality. Every minute we buy on the surface is another minute for Goliath to become our only hope of a decisive strike. The revelation, grim though it was, injected a new surge of determination into the room. The enemy was relentless, but humanity had found a strategy, however remote, that might change the game. Now, survival long enough to use it was the only goal. Chapter 33, The Wrath of the Hegemony. Location, Command Bridge of the Supreme Battleship, Star Devourer, KRTAC Vanguard Fleet, Earth Orbit. Time, hours after the conclusion of the second wave. The air on the bridge of the Star Devourer was thick with tension. Projections of the ravaged Earth displayed the magnitude of the purge, but also the irritating points of light indicating the persistence of the terrestrial interference. Emperor XY stood rigid, watching as the main screen opened to reveal the towering hologram of Supreme Commander Valerius, the highest authority of the hegemony. Valerius' presence was, in itself, a reproach. Emperor XY, the Supreme Commander's voice was a silent thunder, resonating with undeniable authority. His eyes, more intricate and luminous than HFY's, fixed on him with a cold intensity. The reports of Entity 347 Gamma are incomprehensible. The second wave has not achieved total collapse. The interference persists at unacceptable levels. Complete resolution was expected in less time. Explanations, HFY. HFY maintained his composure. Supreme Commander. The resistance of this biological entity has exceeded all initial projections for a Gamma-class civilization. They have demonstrated a capacity for sacrifice and tactical adaptability unseen in stellar cycles. They exploit their own environment to create defenses, have mined their substructures, and employ a visceral tenacity. The casualties they have inflicted upon us are insignificant to our forces, yet they are achieving a wear-down of units and a delay that was unforeseeable. Wear-down of units, hissed Valerius, the resonance of his voice rising. General Th. Lord Scientist Zarkin, do you confirm this anomaly? Have Gamma-class entities evolved beyond our classification parameters? General Th. activated a detailed projection of KR-TAC losses in the second wave. Supreme Commander. We confirm the neutralization of 8,672 KR-TAC ground assault units, of which 3,500 were heavy vanguard units. A 400% increase in heavy unit losses compared to the first wave. Their resistance is chaotic and primitive, but relentless. Lord Scientist Zarkin intervened. Supreme Commander. Our analyses suggest that the interference has developed an unexpected resilience to saturation. They have managed to keep the energy cores of their counter-frequency nodes functioning at minimal levels despite the surface devastation. One node in particular maintains 80% of its capacity. This creates a constant drain effect on our energy resources to maintain pressure and prolongs the purge process. If this anomaly is not resolved quickly, the delay in the timetable of the Great Harvest will be significant. Valerius processed the information, his holographic form glowing with ominous intensity.